New indications an attack on one of America's largest universities may have been the work of a jihadist, with the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee suggesting this bears all the hallmarks of terrorism. Welcome to the Kelly File, everyone. I'm Megyn Kelly, reporting tonight from Chicago. The chaos all started shortly before 10 a.m. local time at The Ohio State University, where students had just returned from Thanksgiving break. The man plowed his car into pedestrians, got out, and started slashing innocent bystanders with a knife. 11 people were hurt. The attacker would later be identified as Abdul Razak Ali Artan, an OSU student and Somali refugee who had legal permanent residence in the United States. Fortunately, his attack did not last long. Within a minute, a 28-year-old officer would shoot him dead. Still, the campus was put on lockdown amid fears the suspect was not acting alone. Students were erroneously told that there was an active shooter on campus, ordered to run, hide, and fight. It now appears those shots belonged to the responding officer alone. All across the campus, the students sheltered in place as the police raced to the scene. And while the authorities have been careful not to disclose a possible motive here, they say terrorism cannot be ruled out.
Based upon common knowledge that this was done on purpose, to go over the curb and strike pedestrians and then get out and start striking them with a knife. That was on purpose.
In moments, we will discuss the evidence with Congressman Peter King and Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer. Then we'll be joined by former Congressman Pete Hoekstra, who has advised President-elect Donald Trump. But we begin tonight with our senior correspondent, Mike Tobin, who is reporting live from Columbus, Ohio. Mike?
And Megyn, sophomore Jacob Bowers had stopped on a bench on campus just before 10 o'clock. He opened his laptop, put his headphones in, and because he had the headphones in, he didn't hear the initial car attack. But he saw out of the corner of his eye people running around, and he looked up to see the attacker flailing away at students with a knife.
It looked like a school of fish and a shark attacking it. Like, he couldn't focus on one person, and that's why everyone got really lucky. Like, he couldn't focus on one, so he couldn't hit anyone.
Now, Bowers also says he heard Officer Alan Harujko give several commands to the attacker before Artan lunged at the officer and the fatal shots were fired. Officer Harujko has been given a lot of credit tonight with preventing further bloodshed. Now, law enforcement sources tell Fox News that they are looking at a Facebook post from earlier in the day, possibly linked to Artan, in which a declaration is made against what is described as unfair treatment of Muslims, and that's being looked at as a possible link to a motive. Megyn?
Mike Tobin, thank you. Joining us now, New York Congressman Peter King, a Republican and member of the Homeland Security and Intelligence Committees, along with Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer, a CIA-trained intel operative and senior fellow at the London Center for Policy Research. Great to see you both. Congressman, let me start with you. Do you believe this is terror?
I believe it has all the indicators of terrorism, and I would be surprised if it's not. Obviously, we can't make a final conclusion, but everything is there. A Somali refugee, the type of attack, hitting people with his vehicle, using the knife. This coming shortly after the president announced that Al-Shabaab, which is based in Somalia, is going to be declared a terrorist organization, right after ISIS encouraged people to use vehicles to crash into crowds and to use knives as a weapon as opposed to a gun. So all the indicators are there. Again, if I had to bet, I'd say yes. And there's been a real problem with the Somali community as far as having a large number of Al-Shabaab supporters.
How does that change this then, Congressman? If that's the way things are leaning, and even your Democratic counterpart is suggesting that they believe this is terror, that this has the hallmarks of terrorism, how does that change the investigation right now?
Well, the FBI will be coming in, Homeland Security. This will be focused as certainly a real possibility of terrorism. We'll also be looking for any type of overseas link to see if there's any connections here in the United States. You have Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Columbus, Ohio, are the two cities, the two areas that have the highest concentration of Somalis. And we've had, I believe, up to 40 Somali Americans have gone over to Somalia to fight as ISIS terrorists. So this is a real threat. It's a real danger. And again, it's a community where the overwhelming majority are good people, but there's a hard core within it. When I had my hearings on Islamist terrorism 5.5 years ago, the first witness we had focused on the threat we have from Somali Americans.
Lieutenant Colonel Shaffer.
Yes.
So now there will be an investigation into this, and a question about whether this guy was, so-called self-radicalized, whether he has connections to ISIS overseas. Your thoughts on that?
Well, look, I think we have to look at the training of this individual, his history. We know, Megyn, that terrorists are basically groomed from 11 years old on. We have to look at a pattern of criminal behavior. These folks are actually kind of put into the pipeline, and frankly, as a congressman was saying, you have a hard core within these communities. This is not remote. This is not just Columbus. It's not just Ohio. It is other places. Canada has had problems with this, as well as Minneapolis. So we have to look at the whole, and frankly, this is a pattern. As Peter was pointing out, ISIS has put out training videos. So the bottom line here is this was an act of terror by everyone's definition. I think we have to accept at this point in time there are cells here. These folks are here functioning, hidden within these larger communities. And Mr. Trump and his team are going to go two ways on this. They're going to have to go and look at those who are already here, regarding the fact that the door has been open. Governor Kasich has accepted an extraordinary number of folks, of Somalis, into Ohio. He now has to accept the responsibility of allowing some, like this individual, to have been let in and attempted to kill Americans. Secondly, we have to do a deeper screening of people coming in. We know the reference communities these folks come from, and as Peter said, Al-Shabaab is a terrorist organization. People go to Somalia and they get radicalized, they get trained, and they come back. We had this issue right after 9/11. We were dealing with the Somalis who were being radicalized back in the early 2000s. We had a very effective way of dealing with that, combined with the military and law enforcement. And frankly, Megyn, those mechanisms don't now exist to prevent this from happening. Remember, this did not happen after 9/11 because we took aggressive measures to protect the American people.
Well, but of course, right, of course. But the question was whether we overstepped our bounds when it comes to people's civil liberties, and it depends on where the country is in terms of a war footing. That's or correct. Whether the people are extraordinarily scared. And you've both lived through that, Congressman Peter King, you especially as a congressman from Long Island, and having known many of the victims on 9/11. But the question is, how far could we go? Because as far as we know, so far this guy had not been on the radar. There was no reason to question whether he might be a terrorist. And so this could be one of the needle in the haystack type situations where the FBI can't really racially profile or religiously profile every Somali who comes into the country.
No, but it is important to have sources and informers within the community. I do believe you have to have surveillance. You have to know who's who to the extent you can. We're not talking about why it's happening. We're not talking about any Fourth Amendment violations. But to me, it is important, just as when you went after organized crime, you go to the communities where the crime is coming from. 99% of the people could be law-abiding, but if you know the crime is coming from there, if you know the terrorist act is going to come from that community, you have to have more surveillance. I think it's legitimate law enforcement and absolutely necessary.
Great to see you both. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Megyn.
Well, as we await more information on the motivation behind this attack, the possible link to terrorism is raising new questions about how national security threats will be dealt with under a Donald Trump presidency. For more on that, we're joined by Pete Hoekstra, former Michigan congressman and an informal advisor to the president-elect. Congressman, good to see you tonight. So let's start there. How do you see things changing? This is the first possible terror attack we have seen since Donald Trump was elected as our next president. How do you see him changing the landscape that President Obama has put into place when it comes to fighting terror?
Well, I think the first thing that you're going to see is you're going to see a President Donald Trump, along with his national security advisor and defense team, is they're going to be much more aggressive overseas. They are not going to allow ISIS or Al-Qaeda or Al-Shabaab or these terrorist organizations to have safe havens in 5 different countries. There's a caliphate that was basically the size of Indiana in Iraq and Syria. 2 failed states, Iraq and Syria. Libya is a failed state. Yemen's a failed state.
Let me just stop you there. Let me just stop you there so you can get specific.
Yeah.
Get specific, yes. Because, President Obama did fight ISIS to some extent late in the game, and they've lost a bunch of territory in Iraq, as you know. But Donald Trump he's largely non-interventionalist. As he put it, I'm the one who wants to keep us out of these wars. So what specifically do you see him doing overseas to control ISIS? Because thus far he said he has a plan, but he hasn't revealed it.
No, number one, you have to recognize President Obama created this situation. When he came into office, Iraq was a relatively stable state. Syria was a stable state. Libya was.
Yep.
I mean, this president created the circumstances where these countries where Gaddafi, Assad, and others were keeping the lid on the garbage can of radical jihadists. He lifted the lid off by getting rid of
now here
Gaddafi.
we are at almost 2017. So what is President Trump going to do?
Well, what the President-elect has made clear, like I said, he's not going to allow these failed states to exist, and he will partner with people in the region. This current president, Obama, has been reluctant to equip and train the Kurds, to train and equip these tribes in Iraq, to defeat ISIS in Iraq. He would not have taken out Gaddafi, and yeah, he has to develop a strategy to go back in and allow a stable government to come back into place in Libya and in Syria, and it's a very deep hole for this president to dig out of.
What about,
the second thing,
I'm
Megan,
short
that
on
he will
time,
not do
but
is
I
he
got to
will
ask
not-
you domestically.
Yeah.
But I got to ask. I'm short on time, but I have to ask you domestically what you see President Donald Trump doing differently versus Barack Obama.
Barack Obama has created what he called countering violent extremism, where he equates every threat potentially in the United States as having the same priority. Donald Trump will focus on the threat from radical jihadism because that is the most significant threat that we face today, and he will start doing some of the things that Peter King has outlined in terms of surveillance and police activities against this very, very specific threat, and it will be a priority.
Surveil Muslim communities?
He will surveil those groups that he believes are the threat, and those are the groups that are linked to radical jihadist tendencies and radical jihadist philosophies, and they are linked to the Muslim Brotherhood.
Former Congressman Pete Hoekstra, great to see you. Thanks for being here, sir.
Hey, great. Thank you.
So we also have breaking news tonight on the possible new cabinet picks, including General David Petraeus, former Governor Mitt Romney, and which one of these two might possibly become our next Secretary of State. Karl Rove and Trump transition team member Jason Miller are next. Plus, new developments with the recount efforts now spreading through 3 different states. And then, with 2 major papers suggesting the president-elect could be in trouble over his business operations in foreign countries, Judge Andrew Napolitano weighs in on whether the legal risk is real.
I would probably have my children run it with my executives, and I wouldn't ever be involved because I wouldn't care about anything but our country, anything.
Today, the former CIA director, David Petraeus, met with Mr. Trump in the middle of reports that David Petraeus is being considered for this job, Secretary of State. Another rumored pick is former Governor Mitt Romney, a man who opposed the president-elect during the campaign, and how. While Mr. Trump is reportedly having lunch with Mitt Romney tomorrow, some of his closest advisors are not Mitt Romney fans.
People feel betrayed to think that Governor Romney, who went out of his way to question the character and the intellect and the integrity of Donald Trump.
I think there is nothing Mitt Romney can say that doesn't sound phony and frankly pathetic. I think we would be enormously disappointed if he brought Mitt Romney in any position of authority.
What do I know about Mitt Romney? I know that he is a self-serving egomaniac who puts himself first, who has a chip on his shoulder that thinks he should be president of the United States.
Fox News contributor Karl Rove joins us in moments, along with Trump transition team communications director Jason Miller. But first, we go to Chief Washington correspondent James Rosen with more. James?
Megan, good evening. If former General David Petraeus assumes a top spot in the Trump administration, perhaps the Secretary of State role so widely speculated for him, it would mark a stunning comeback for the former CIA director, once hailed as the best and brightest public servant of his generation, forced in 2012 to resign and later plead guilty to having knowingly mishandled classified information when he shared it with his biographer and lover, Paula Broadwell, and to admit that he lied about it to the FBI. After a visit to the 26th floor of Trump Tower, General Petraeus this afternoon deflected questions about the roughly 1 hour he spent with the president-elect.
He basically walked us around the world, showed a great grasp of a variety of the challenges that are out there and some of the opportunities as well. So, very good conversation, and we'll see where it goes from here.
And the president-elect stoked the intrigue with a 4 p.m. tweet saying, "Just met with General Petraeus, was very impressed." Still said to be in the running for Secretary of State are former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani, the strongest Trump loyalist in the mix, 2012 Republican nominee Mitt Romney, who attacked Mr. Trump during the 2016 primaries, and former UN Ambassador John Bolton. Senior Trump advisor Kellyanne Conway has taken an unusually public stand against Romney in tweets and comments to reporters, leading many to believe that an operative of her experience and savvy would not make the mistake of appearing to be trying to force her boss's hand.
I'm all for party unity, but I'm not sure that we have to pay for that with the Secretary of State position. But again, let me repeat, what Donald Trump decides, Kellyanne Conway and everybody else will respect. It's just the backlash from the grassroots.
Still, Romney is up for that second session with the president-elect tomorrow. Megan.
James, thank you. Joining me now, Karl Rove, a Fox News political contributor and former deputy chief, senior advisor, and assistant to President George W. Bush. Karl, good to see you. What do you make of this public infighting or head fake? I don't know what is going on, because the reports are that Kellyanne Conway went rogue in speaking out against the possible pick of Mitt Romney, and then the other reports by the AP tonight are that she did nothing of the kind, and Donald Trump knew exactly what she was going to say and supported it.
Yeah, well, look, I don't know which is true. I just think it's unseemly and unconstructive. It makes Donald Trump, whatever the intention, look weak. It makes him look like he's waffling. It makes him look like he is being pressured. And that's not what a president-elect or a president ought to look like. Second of all, it's not conducive to creating the right kind of atmosphere inside the White House, to people feeling that they can give their private opinions directly to the president in front of their colleagues who might disagree with them, and not worry about being outed in the newspaper, something leaked on their leaked to make them look stupid. I mean, imagine what would happen in a White House if a presidential advisor went out and said, well, I told him not to appoint so-and-so to the Supreme Court, but to appoint so-and-so, or I told him to pursue this policy action, not that policy action. That wouldn't be conducive to the smooth operation of the White House, or to putting the president in the best possible light.
Mm-hmm. So what is going on here? Because the speculation is that perhaps Donald Trump is looking to embarrass Mitt Romney, who was a vicious critic of Trump's during the campaign. This is like playing out like an episode of The Apprentice, where he decides who goes forward and who doesn't in the most dramatic fashion. What do you make of it?
Well, look, I don't know what to make of it. There are two options. One option is that he authorized Kellyanne Conway to go do this in order to embarrass Romney, to be able to, at the end of the day, throw up his hands and say, sorry, the grassroots, my grassroots supporters wouldn't let you. But look, that's just too Machiavellian. I think Donald Trump was so magnanimous in his comments on election night that it caused a lot of people to say, you know what, I may not have voted for the guy, but boy, that's the kind of president I want to see. And he's done that so often since the election, and I think it would ill serve him to be engaged in that kind of Machiavellian. But better to be magnanimous to Romney and decide to go someplace else if he wanted to really sort of score some points against Romney, rather than going through this. The other option, of course, is that she's gone rogue, in which case she's not serving her principal well. He needs to look strong. The world is watching now. They're taking the measure of the man, and this is not something that's going to make him look stronger.
That doesn't sound like Kellyanne Conway to go rogue. We'll see. Karl, great to see you.
Great, thank you.
Joining me now, Jason Miller, Communications Director for the Presidential Transition Team. Jason, good to see you. So what's the story? Did Kellyanne Conway go rogue with those comments or not?
No, not at all. And in fact, the President-elect and Kellyanne and myself, along with Hope Hicks, were sharing a chuckle about that earlier this evening. No, Kellyanne chatted with the President-elect in advance of going out and offering her comments, and asked his permission if it was okay to go and voice her opinions on the matter. And he said, go for it. And I think that's one of the great things about what we're going to see with the
MSNBC report that Trump was livid, that he's furious with what she did, that's not true.
No, not at all. In fact, the president-elect gave her permission to go out and do that, and she did. And I think that's one of the great things about this White House is the president-elect and our future president will take in a number of different viewpoints and opinions, and then he'll form his own decision, decide how he wants to go forward. One thing I would want to push
let's talk about that.
Let me push back on one thing that Mr. Rove said a moment ago, though.
Yep.
There's a difference between going out in advance with permission and voicing your opinion as the president-elect goes to collect a number of different thoughts on the matter, decides who he wants to go with for a particular position, and then doing it after the fact.
No, I think Carl would acknowledge that. He was responding to what I was telling him, which is these conflicting news reports. MSNBC was reporting that Donald Trump was furious with her and she went rogue, and then the AP was reporting that's completely wrong. So he was going with me down those two scenarios. But I want to ask you about General David Petraeus, because we'd been, told that it was almost decided that it would either be Rudy Giuliani or Mitt Romney for Secretary of State. And then up pops General David Petraeus. How do you like his odds?
Well, I still, as you noted, we still have Mayor Giuliani, who's very strongly being considered for a top-level pick within the administration. Obviously, Governor Romney is someone who'd be a top-flight contender if he were to choose to come into the administration, if the president-elect were to offer him something. I think one of the important things to point out is that you have other folks who are coming in to offer advice, to give their different opinions. General Petraeus is someone who's very highly sought after. In fact, he was just at the White House a few months ago. They were still bringing him back in to offer his opinions. And so as the president-elect brings everyone together and he starts to formulate his opinions, he's going to make his own pick here and make his decision. But obviously, I'm a big fan of Mayor Giuliani, having worked for him in 2008. Governor Romney has a very strong track record, but ultimately, one person is going to make this decision. That'll be the president-elect.
Can you give us any hint on the timing of that?
I would not expect that tomorrow. Governor Romney and the president-elect will be getting together for dinner tomorrow night, so they'll be continuing their discussion. I think another thing to point out is the two hadn't spent that much time together previously. But tomorrow, I would expect we're going to have some very exciting announcements. Not only will we have, I think, first thing tomorrow morning, we'll have one cabinet-level pick as well as another top administration official. I think
is it Tom Price at HHS, as the New York Times is reporting tonight?
Stay tuned. You'll get official confirmation very first thing tomorrow morning. But I think we're going to have a second cabinet level pick coming tomorrow as well. So again, as the president-elect reaches his decision and he's picked some really excellent people for his cabinet, then we're going to go and get those out.
Great. We'll look forward to that, Jason. Thanks for being here.
All right. Thanks, Megan.
All the best. Well, a couple of major media outlets suggesting that the president-elect is going to end up in trouble over his business operations in foreign countries. We asked Judge Napolitano to review that argument, and his ruling is just ahead. Plus, new fallout tonight from a series of recount efforts backed by Jill Stein and Hillary Clinton. Where's this going? That's next.
They have to decide whether they're going to interfere with him finishing his business, interfere with the peaceful transfer of power to President-elect Trump and Vice President-elect Pence, or if they're going to be a bunch of crybabies and sore losers about an election that they can't turn around.
Well, we have new fallout tonight from the recount efforts sweeping a handful of battleground states. It started last week with Green Party candidate Jill Stein demanding a recount in the state of Wisconsin. The Clinton campaign then announced on Saturday it would be joining that effort as her demands, Jill Stein's, for recounts then spread to Michigan and Pennsylvania. Critics, including the president-elect, have slammed the whole thing as, quote, a scam to raise money by Ms. Stein. And then Mr. Trump took it a step further by alleging that he actually won the popular vote, which he lost to Hillary Clinton, that he actually won it, he now claims, because of millions of people who he claims actually voted illegally. Carl Cameron has the latest details on this entire mess. Carl?
Thanks, Megan. Though few think it's going to make any kind of a difference, it looks like there will at least be one recount, and it might be in Wisconsin. First, Michigan, though. The State Board of Canvassers finally certified Trump's victory by more than 10,000 votes this afternoon. Green Party candidate Jill Stein has until Wednesday to file for a Michigan recount. If approved, Trump gets 7 days to object and contest it. Now back to Wisconsin. Election commissioners rejected Stein's request for a hand recount today. Instead, they said local clerks will get to decide how best to recount starting this coming Thursday. And they have to be finished by December 13th. Stein filed for a Pennsylvania recount this afternoon, too, but because the deadline is today and the requirements for approval are so difficult, she petitioned the court for more time. It actually requires affidavits from at least 3 voters in each of Pennsylvania's more than 9,000 voting precincts, and the process requires a notary to stamp the affidavit, which then has to be delivered to the county clerk's office for final certification. Hillary Clinton's campaign joined the recount effort over the course of this weekend, saying it wasn't to overturn Trump's win, but to make sure a fair process is preserved for all the parties. Trump tweeted up a storm this weekend and without any evidence alleged widespread voter fraud. In one tweet he said, quote, "In addition to winning the Electoral College in a landslide, I won the popular vote if you deduct the millions of people who voted illegally." He also tweeted, "Serious voter fraud in Virginia, New Hampshire, and California. So why isn't the media reporting on this? Serious bias. Big problem." Election officials in those 3 states where Democrats are in charge have denied any widespread vote fraud and they've criticized Trump's tweets as inappropriate and ill-informed. Megan?
Carl, thank you. Joining me now with more, former Trump campaign national spokesperson Katrina Pearson and Fox News contributor and founding executive director of Georgetown University's Institute of Politics and Public Service, Mo Elleithee. Great to see you both. So, Katrina, let me start with you. What is the problem with Jill Stein asking for a recount in these states?
Well, Megan, there isn't a problem, except for Jill Stein was nowhere close to even winning in any of these states, and recounts are not uncommon. It's just quite odd at the timing of all this as well, and the fact that Hillary Clinton, someone who said, you know, we really should accept the election results, and the media for nearly a week criticized Donald Trump for saying we'll have to wait and see until the election comes. So I think it's real sinister what's happening here, not to mention that Clinton donors are the one piling money into Jill Stein's coffers. I think it's all suspect.
What about that, Mo? Because Hillary Clinton told Chris Wallace at the Fox News at the debate that he hosted that it was horrible, that Donald Trump's refusal to say that he would accept the outcome of the election was horrible, and she was just disgusted by it. And now she's like, oh, we'll participate. We'd like to see about that recount too.
Well, that's not exactly what she's saying, right? I mean, she conceded the election. Her campaign has said, we don't think we're going to overturn. We don't think this election will get overturned. They said Donald Trump will be the president come January 20th. And they've said that they did their own due diligence over the past few weeks amid reports that there might have been some sort of interference. And they did not find any actionable evidence of any sort of widespread voter fraud. But if someone else is going to put forward this recount, they're going to have lawyers in the room. They'd be stupid not to, frankly, right? They would be stupid not to have lawyers in the room just to monitor the process. But here's what I don't understand.
Why even put a lawyer there? If they go through the process and something interesting happens, like somehow miraculously Jill Stein actually won Wisconsin, then she can go send her lawyers to look at it herself, can't she?
That's not going to happen. They're not putting any money into this. They're just going to have a lawyer in the room, and I think that would be. I think that's prudent and it makes sense. What it does not make sense.
I don't know, Mo. You can see why Team Trump is a little suspicious of Hillary Clinton's hand in this.
Yeah, of course they're going to be suspicious. But I personally just think there's nothing untoward about having an attorney in the room. What I think is odd is that the president-elect who won this election, Megan, you've heard me say this almost every time I've been on since the election day. He won it fair and square. He is the next president of the United States, and congratulations to the campaign for winning. Why is he the only one truly questioning the legitimacy of the election? Why is he saying millions of voters were illegal voters? That just does not make sense to me.
Because 2016. Kat, the man has a point, does he not? Donald Trump may be the first president in U.S. history to question the legitimacy of the election he won.
That's right.
No, absolutely not. Mr. Trump is not questioning the legitimization of the election. He's questioning the popular vote, because that's the one thing the Clinton camp and the left are holding on to with dear life.
Based on what, though? But they're not holding on to it to say she won. But they're not holding on to it to say that she won.
Because they want to do away with the Electoral College now.
Yes, I know, but whatever side loses always says that. Where does he get his evidence that millions of illegal immigrants voted in this election, that millions of people voted illegally?
Well, I think it's a combination of things. I mean, you can look at the Daily Caller back in October wrote an article about showing what voter fraud looks like, and they listed 23 states and the instances that happened there. You can go back to the LA Times about a year ago, where they talked about Governor Jerry Brown's voter motor registration, which automatically had people register to vote.
It's a supposition.
And they said there were 2 million. Well, but there have been instances, like in Iowa, there was a woman who was convicted and prosecuted for voting, and she was an illegal alien. These things do happen.
A woman does not equal millions, and millions possible months or a year earlier does not make it actually happen on November 8th.
Right.
Well, I also think that's something we should look at. You know, the argument here is that you can't prove it. Well, how about we disprove it?
Why do you want anyone looking at anything when your team won?
Well, we don't. It's just the point of, if you're going to say something like we won because of X, Mr. Trump is saying, no, you didn't. Look, Mr. Trump won this race.
But he should stick to the facts in doing that. Why isn't it enough for him that he won the Electoral College? Why does he have to make up information that he also won the popular vote, which he lost?
Because people know government is corrupt. It's quite obvious now. America has voted.
No.
They don't trust their politicians. They know the media is not on their side.
But they trust the Electoral College. They trust that, but they don't trust the voting machines that tallied the other votes. I'll give you the last vote, or the last word, Mo.
But in these counties, it matters because of local elections too, and it should be validated.
There were 3 people prosecuted who are Trump supporters for trying to vote more than once. We can sit here and cherry pick isolated incidents, but they are just that. They are isolated incidents. By saying that there were millions of illegal votes, that questions the sanctity of our entire electoral process. That feeds additional, when that comes from the president-elect, not from a candidate, but from the president-elect of the United States. That gives our foreign adversaries.
People who work in these counties that see it every election cycle.
But they don't.
We can't have it both ways, Katrina. You can't have it both ways. If we're not supposed to have a recount because we're supposed to trust the integrity of the process, then we can't go out there and say millions of people voted illegally. You can't have it both ways.
Well, we'd love a recount. We'd love a recount and win all over again.
That's probably what's going to happen, because Jill Stein is insisting that there be one, and there's no chance she won Wisconsin. Up next, with 2 of Mr. Trump's least favorite newspapers now predicting legal trouble with Mr. Trump's foreign investments, we asked Judge Andrew Napolitano to review the case. His findings are next. Tonight, new fallout after both the New York Times and the Washington Post published lengthy and detailed reports over the weekend looking at President-elect Donald Trump's foreign business investments and predicting legal trouble ahead. In a moment, Judge Andrew Napolitano will review the case, but first up, Trace Gallagher details the reports. Trace?
Hey, Megyn, Donald Trump acknowledges that his brand has never been hotter and says that in theory he could run his business perfectly and run the country perfectly because for the president there is no conflict of interest, though there is a constitutional ban on accepting foreign payments. But the ethical concern being raised by many is whether Trump will pursue policy that's best for the nation or best for his company. Congressional Democrats are already calling for Trump's foreign business dealings to be investigated. The U.S. has never had a president with business operations in at least 20 countries. And even if Trump doesn't seek advantages from foreign governments, the worry is those governments will try to ingratiate themselves to Trump by offering special favors. In fact, it's worth noting that several of Trump's real estate ventures in India are reportedly being built by companies with family ties to the Indian government. And the Washington Post reports that in just the past few weeks, Trump Tower projects in Buenos Aires and in the former Soviet Republic of Georgia, which have long been stalled, are now back on track. Though Donald Trump says only the crooked media make this a big deal. And if being the U.S. president can boost the brand, it can also damage it. Experts say Trump properties around the world, especially in the Middle East, are symbols of American capitalism and could be attractive targets for terrorists. The president-elect maintains that his children will take over the company, the same children who are now working his day-to-day transition team. Megyn.
Trace, thank you. So what are the legal implications of Mr. Trump's business dealings? Joining me now, our Fox News senior judicial analyst, Judge Andrew Napolitano. Judge, good to see you. So what specifically do you see as a problem, if any?
Actually, the problem for President-elect Trump is a political one and not a legal one. The reason it's not a legal one is that all the ethics rules that the Congress has written and his predecessors have signed into office regulating everybody that works for the federal government have 2 exceptions to them: the vice president and the president. So none of the rules that govern everyone else govern him. Stated differently, he can lawfully run the executive branch of the federal government and operate his businesses at the same time. He can engage in dealing which appears to be a conflict of interest, and again, the remedy is political, it's not legal. Look, he can't break the law. He can't accept payments from foreign governments in order to confer benefits on them, and even his wildest critics have not accused him of that. But if he toes the line, can probably do what he says he's going to do, be a good businessman and be a great president at the same time.
So it's fine for him if he's on the phone with, the leader of Argentina, as he reportedly was, and sort of says, hey, now that we're done with state business, what's the status with my approval on my hotel down there? Sure would help me out if you could get that pushed through quickly. That's legal? That's fine?
That is legal. It may appear unlawful. It would be unlawful if a governor did it. It would be unlawful if a senator or a member of Congress did it. But it is not unlawful for the president. Candidly, Megyn, when these statutes were written, nobody contemplated a Donald Trump. Nobody contemplated a billionaire with serious interests in 20 countries around the world, even countries that are currently not friendly with the United States. They wanted to give the president as much freedom as possible.
If it's not forbidden, what would the prudent thing be in the eyes of these legal experts who are looking at it? Which is it's an obvious, it makes you feel bad. I don't know why. It makes you feel a little concerned that our country shouldn't be a bargaining chip in a business dealing.
Here's why it's going to make people feel bad. People will wonder, as much as they want to trust him, as much as people want him to be successful, people will wonder, is he making the best decision for the country, or is he making the best decision for himself? And what happens when there's an inexorable conflict between those two? It would be a lot easier for him. He'd be a better president and a happier president if he put all of his holdings into a blind trust and had no contact with the trustee. Does he have to do that? No. And if he doesn't do it, the remedy is criticism, investigations, and political ramifications, but no legal wrongdoing.
That's what 2020 is for.
Yes.
Judge, good to see you.
Pleasure, Megyn.
Coming up, we'll explain this.
I soon realized that one of the glories of Chicago was the weather. I soon realized I was thrilled to have my own... let me start over. I soon realized that one of the most amazing things about Chicago...
So I'm on location in Chicago to promote my new book, Settle for More, which is now a #1 New York Times bestseller, thanks to all of you. Part of the memoir discusses my time in Chicago, which started off so happy, but changed over time, leading to my realization, ultimately, that I could settle for more. Watch. It was 1995, nearly 22 years ago to the day that I first laid eyes on the beautiful city of Chicago. I was a third-year law student in Albany at the time, and a law firm put me up at the Intercontinental. I remember looking out at Michigan Avenue and the twinkling lights on the trees, with all the busy professionals down below hailing taxis and carrying briefcases, and thinking to myself, with hard work, I can get there.
I soon realized that one of the most wonderful things about Chicago was the weather, and that's still true to this day. I found an apartment building steps away from the beautiful Navy Pier, just steps away from Oprah Winfrey's building, whose show I used to watch late at night. I moved in, glorified to find out that I had my very own washer-dryer, and my TV was on a couple of milk crates. Between that and my white Franzia boxed wine and my Tina Turner CDs, I felt like I had arrived. I worked very hard as an attorney. First in this building right here at a law firm called Bickel & Brewer, and then for most of my career at a law firm called Jones Day. I was on the best cases, working with the best partners. In fact, all I did was work. And soon I realized that just because you're good at something doesn't mean it makes you happy. It was one night while driving home on the Kennedy Expressway, with tears streaming down my face out of sheer exhaustion, that it dawned on me how unhappy I was. I wanted to have an accident, not because I really wanted to hurt myself, but because I desperately needed a rest. And I thought if I could break a major bone, like a femur, perhaps I could get one. By the light of day the next morning, it finally occurred to me that perhaps I didn't need to break a bone. Perhaps I could just make a career change. So I had resolved to change my life. But how? Well, I was taking guitar classes as a stress reliever. And in the class, I met a TV news producer. She agreed to help me. Late at night, after my law job, I would come out to the streets of Chicago, like this bridge, and shoot stand-ups with a photographer. Within 6 months of that, I got my first TV news job. Within 12 months of that, I got hired by Fox News.
And the rest, as they say, is history. The book is called Settle for More, and it will make an excellent Christmas gift. And I do love